Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dream On podcast. My name is Julia Gentry.
And I am Travis Gentry.
And if you are part of our Facebook group, which you should be, we are live. We are live with our friends. If you're like, what Facebook group and how do I get involved? Click on the link in the show notes that you will listen to later because you didn't get a front row seat. It's an incredible community where we just do life together, but more importantly, we bold we bold together. We be bold. We dream bold dreams together. For our community, as you're listening, we are glad that you're here watching this live. I'm going to do better this time. So if you've got questions, you've got thoughts, we want to know, we want to see, we want to hear from you. But today is an exciting topic, and one of the reasons that we thought we would do this in our Facebook group is because though it should be a topic that we do well, we don't actually do it well. And it's called Creating a Dream Team, Practical Steps for Making Each Other's Dreams Reality. But first, before we go there, it's my turn to ask the question. Travis and I like to ask each other questions that allow you to know us better and cause us to be off kiltered, surprised, go on an adventure.
Do it. Give it to me. I like it.
Okay, so my question to you, I had it written down, is what's one thing you will never do again?
What is one thing I will never do again? In any area of my life?
Just the first thing that comes to mind. Something that you've done, you're like, yep, won't do that again.
Oh, man. What will I not do? What will I not do?
You guys, this is that awkward 5-second pause you're not supposed to have in a podcast.
Yeah, there's not. I'm drawing a blank of what I would not do. I mean,
Really?
there's silly things of like I wouldn't eat certain things, but
Well, do that can be silly. This doesn't have to be dramatic.
I would never eat olives again.
What did you have an olive last?
Oh, here's what I would never do.
You should have another one because they're really good.
Disgusting. I would never walk 20 miles in Hawaii with one water bottle and a sandwich. That's what I would never do again.
Ask him how he knows. And olives. And he wouldn't eat olives.
A bucket of olives. No, we didn't have olives. But we had a sandwich and one water bottle to walk 20 miles.
I would walk 500
I would never. I would do it again, but man, we were ill prepared. That was like, well, I remember what we were walking up these switchbacks, and it was probably like, I don't know, 2,800 vertical feet up at the very end. So we're already exhausted and out of water, and I think we had maybe a little bit of trail mix with some raisins, a little sugar in there. And we were like walking up, and you walk up a switchback, and you're like, oh, I think we're almost there. And we get to one, and we're like, no. And we had like our shirt wrapped around us because we didn't bring sunscreen. Like we were so ill prepared.
But not our friend. Our friend that came with us was overly prepared.
Like an
ultra prepared.
Ultra marathoner, though. Like that's what he eats for breakfast.
He's like, oh, poor Gentrys. They will live and learn and not do that again.
Well, he came back down the mountain.
With water.
We were like halfway up, and he was coming back down like, we're like,
he's like waving at people. He's like, I'm just gonna go with my friends. They're dying. They're dying.
What I would never do.
Solid. Okay, but here we're gonna talk about things that you probably should do. And why I say that this is one of those topics that it feels like, I remember even talking to you about this topic, and you were like, well, don't we do that? We should do this. We should have very clear understanding of how to coexist with other humans, whether they're in our house or in our business or in our relationships, and say, hey, I want to know your dreams, you want to know my dreams, and we boldly want to do this together. But the reality is most of us, A, don't know our dreams, and then B, we don't know how to boldly chase our own dreams, yet alone make space for someone else's. So today's podcast is really around how do you create this dream team, not only in your marriage, because this is important, and oftentimes where people get stuck is how do you create, like, how do I chase my dreams if you're chasing your dreams? Mm-hmm. And how do we create space and time and alignment? Or what if what you dream is not what I dream? But also I think when we think about business relationships and friendships and, right, my mom or my dad or my brothers or my sisters, of how do we actually create these dream teams in life so that we can chase our dreams together? That's what we're going to talk about today. That's what we're talking about.
So good.
It's so good.
As you were saying that, here's the thought that came into my mind. I think that and just put it in percentage wise, and I have no idea. I'd have to think about this a little bit more, but it's almost, I would say 50% of people don't live out their dreams because of them. 30%, 35% don't live out because they what they think their spouse is going to say or do or react or how they're going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 to 15% is kind of the world around them.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is internal.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they won't even get started to like go to that place,
Mm-hmm.
and they get to a point where it's like, what did Shane say?
Oh my gosh, it was like my favorite. It was like my favorite thing. It was actually in our Dream Academy. We started a new hub, and we had a friend on there who invited the whole group into his process by basically saying, I started out with big dreams. He's like, in my 20s I had big dreams, and then over time they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And he said, and now I've come to Academy because I've lost my dream, but I realize it's because I've lost me.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And then he said, but then somewhere along the lines too, because I'm a lover, I started to love people so much that I started to care more about what they thought. And that also created me losing myself too. And so it was just this like, oh my gosh, there's so many different directions that we could go with that. But I think that's what we wanted to talk about today, is that it's easy to no longer be dreaming bold dreams because you've just lost yourself. And a lot of times we lose ourselves because we're trying to serve everybody else, and then serving everybody else, right, kind of bites us in the butt sometimes, or now we care more about what they think than what we think, and it just gets messy, which is why it's so important for us to understand how to do this well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Let's talk about that. So I think I just kind of wanted to start with kind of framing it from, just a biblical perspective. All of us know this verse in 1 Corinthians 13. It's a chapter about love. But this, in the Passion Translation, the title of this actually says love is the motivation of our lives. So in this verse, it opens it up by saying, if I were to speak in eloquence of earth's many languages and in heavenly tongues, but I didn't have love, I am nothing, right? And if I do this, I am nothing. And so it's walking through, if I have the gift of prophecy, but I don't love, I am nothing. If I speak with eloquence, but I don't love, I am nothing. But then it says this, but if I had the greatest gift of faith that could move mountains, but I never learned to love, then I am nothing. And I circled that word over and over and over again, learned to love. And I just thought that was so fascinating, because I think part of this in how we start to support each other's dreams is I think that it's so interconnected just to learning how to love each other well. And in our previous podcast, we talked about just our communication hacks and how our communication oftentimes as adults is what was modeled to us as a kid. But I think what this is saying, even from a scriptural perspective, is that we have to learn to love well. We have to learn to love well, which means we have to unlearn what we think love is so that we can actually learn what love really is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. So I think that's a starting point. As our kids are giggling outside, you could probably hear them. But then what it says is, if you continue on, it says that love is an eternal energy, and it's an active power of bonding hearts and lives in secure relationships. So I say that because I think as we're building life together, or as we're building our dreams together, we have to recognize that real love ensures that we are building relationships that are secure, right? Like that is actually a safe place to fail, a safe place to try, a safe place to dream bold, a safe place to say, I'm sorry. And I think oftentimes we're not creating relationships that feel safe. And I think that's a huge piece of it. So I wanted to throw that out there because I think it's an important piece to this whole process, is that we have to learn how to do this well. And we have to look at our relationships from this place of, how do we make it safe? So I wanted to hear from you. How does that, when you hear me say that, what comes up for you?
I didn't think you were going to go this direction with it, so I don't have a comment at this
Okay,
point.
great. Tell me what you are thinking then.
Just as far as kind of like making our dreams possible.
Yeah.
And just allowing, I mean, the first, how I process this and how we've processed this over the years is like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
So we look at the worst case financially, physically, like in all areas of our life, and we kind of do like a self audit where we're at, and then what's the worst case scenario if we take these steps.
Yeah, well, okay, but so let me just say this, is that I think what's allowed us to do that is 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 some of this. It's a mindset of saying, okay, that step for me, if I, because I know that that's one of the things that we wanted to share today, which is how we start to chase our bold dreams. That would feel very hard to do if I actually didn't feel like I was in a secure relationship with you.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that setting that as a foundation is, if you are in a relationship of any kind right now that isn't on that secure foundation, it's going to make some of these other practical steps not so practical.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think that this piece, what you're saying, is very practical. But if I don't actually feel like I've learned how to love you well, and I don't feel safe in that, makes it challenging.
Yeah. I mean, there again, coming back to, if you don't love yourself, you're not willing to, like, you're going to sabotage yourself physically. Like, if you're overweight, like there's something inside of you that you don't fully love yourself.
Yeah.
If you're financially, you continually to struggle, like there's something within yourself that you don't fully embrace and love.
Yeah.
And so there again, it comes back to identifying and understanding, limiting beliefs and thoughts and patterns and habits. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I get the concept of like, I have to love myself, and then I have to love like this journey. I have
Yeah.
to love my spouse. I
Yeah.
have to trust my spouse.
Yep.
And so that's a process that we've been through throughout, the last 15 years.
Mhm.
And we've experienced it, and it's there again, it's allowed us to look at the worst case scenario, and in certain situations experience the worst case
Scenario
scenario
together. Right.
together.
And I think here's how, if you go, well, I'm in a relationship right now. And again, we're kind of leaning in more marriage than not, but this works in any type of relationship that you're willing to have a vulnerable conversation. Here's the simple, stupid, hard question, which is, how could I love you well?
Yeah.
Right. Like that, just straight up. Okay. So I want to do this life with you. I want to chase our dreams together. I want to be connected to you. Right. Or if you're like in a business relationship, you're like, hey, how could I help you chase your dreams well? It doesn't have to be about that love word. Like, how could I help you chase after this dream well? How could I support you well? If I'm in a marriage, how could I love you well? Just ask that question,
Yeah.
because it's going to force the other person to go, oh, thank you for asking. I don't know. Most people are like, I don't know. Just support me. And you're like, well, but what would that actually look like? It forces me, as the person who is hungry for your support, to recognize I actually don't really know. I have these unclear expectations that I'm projecting on you, which is why I get all prickly when you don't do what I want you to do, but I can't actually tell you what I want you to do. And so by someone just stopping long enough to go, hey, I see you've got this dream, or I want to be on this journey with you. How could I love you well? How could I support your dreams well? How could I support you well?
Yeah.
Great, great place to start.
Yeah. I think with any, like, as we're talking dreams and looking back at our journey, it's been always like, it goes back to me, like there's probabilities,
Yeah.
and there's, when you're looking and identifying, hey, I want to go after this, I want to do this, whether it's a career change or living in a different state or country, whatever that may be, like looking at like what is the probabilities. So for couples, what I've seen over the years is that if one spouse is not on the same page, it's really comes back to, she just does not have enough information to make the decision. Because if you stack up the probabilities, then it's a 20% failure and 80% success. If she or he understood that, and
Yeah,
then
that's so good.
the
The
20%,
probabilities.
the 20%, what's the worst case?
So you're saying we've got a chance.
Yeah. And there's always risk to anything.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna quit my job, I'm gonna go full time, and I want to be a doctor, and I want to go back to medical school. It's going to take 7 years, and you work through all of the things that has to happen, and who I need to become to get to that point. And are we willing to sacrifice this together?
Oh man, that's so huge. I think that why that's so huge is because what happens for most people is, if I come to you with a bold dream, it's out of comfort zone. We've never done it before. What does that mean about me? What does that mean about you? Like, I think we immediately start doing the, am I safe? Am I secure? Am I stable? All of those things. And then because we don't actually understand the probability, and because we as people have a negative bias always, which means we just assume the worst, right? That we, without knowing it, make this probability of failure so much bigger. And even if it is a higher probability of failure, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And are we still up for the challenge? But I think, to your point, is that if the other person is able to bring, right, that percentage, or the, like, here's the worst case, here's the best case, it kind of draws a line in the sand of like, emotional decision making and practical decision making.
Yeah. Well, there again, coming back to that, I think we've worked on the trust of each other, where there's certain actions that you have taken over the last year,
Yeah.
and I trust you.
Yeah.
And I think that there's still like we, need to communicate of like, hey, I'm making these decisions and I'm taking this action. But at the end of the day, like we've worked through that so much.
Yeah.
Like I know, and you even said it the other day, like you're making these big moves and hiring people, and we're starting a nonprofit, and you had said like the worst case is like all of this doesn't work and I have to go get a job.
Totally.
And you're like, oh,
Okay.
that's not so bad.
Yeah.
Like it's not death. Like if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna die. You're like, no, like the worst case is, and you back up to it. And we know that we're both capable and able if we had to go get a job, but we've worked on our skills to be able to at least produce
Yeah.
a certain amount. So if we need to lean back, or go get a job, we know that we can't. So that's the worst case scenario for us.
Yeah.
So going back to, I think it's so important that what I see with individuals, and I'm like all these conversations are popping in my head.
Mm-hmm.
If the spouse or the partner came to the other individual with more information, it makes that decision so much easier to make.
Yeah.
Because one, I could say, you just don't have enough information for me to make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
instead
you
of
need to,
spiraling
yeah,
emotionally.
like you're like, I want to do this. And you're like, that sounds like absurd.
Yeah.
But if you said, hey, I want to do this, and here's all of the information that I've gathered,
Yeah.
and here's all the pros, and here's all the cons, and here's what I've come up with, like the best and worst case scenario,
Yeah.
and here's how long it's going to take. And then the other spouse can ask clarifying questions, or the other business partner, if you're making a business decision, then it's like a dialogue, as opposed to you have this dream, you went after it, you may have not educated yourself or had enough information, you failed, and then you come to the table with another dream, and then the person's like, no,
Yeah.
because their experience of you is failure through lack of preparation.
Totally.
And so if I can come to the table and we can go back and forth, then the other person is invited into the conversation.
Yeah.
And understanding, okay, like I'm committed to you, and we just need to have certain things in place. So if the worst case happens, like I'm on the same page
Well,
too.
it's funny that you're saying this now and processing it, because I think that it's important. And I don't know that this is the easiest to clarify in the moment, but I think that there is parts of the process of, we'll just call it this dream manifestation, right, in a relationship. And what's fascinating is about that spot that you're talking about right there, which is so necessary, which is really unpacking the probability, worst case scenario, what do we know, what do we not know. Me as a visionary with so many dreams, if I think that I've held back on some of my dreams because all I wanted to do was just be vulnerable and to share them. But the minute you started to shift into probability, and I haven't gotten that far, I just want my dreams to be heard, and I know that it seems like I'm bold, but a lot of my dreams are very vulnerable and they feel very out there. And so now I can, like, my life as your wife, like, flashes before my eyes, because I can see that you believe in me big, huge. So it's like anytime I have a dream, you're generally going like, how do we make that happen? Like, you're already shifting into probability, best, worst case.
Mhm.
But there's a time too when I think we have to incubate the dream. We have to determine, is this a God dream, good dream, or just an idea, right? Like it, and give it some space. And so I think that this is a fascinating to talk through, is because in those moments I should have been able to go like, hey, I just want to dream with you. I don't know if this is possible. I don't know if I really want it. It feels kind of vulnerable to me. And it would allow you just to hear my dream, as opposed to start making probable charts around around it. Cause that's what immediately I'm like, and then I've seen myself shut down because I don't have those answers. And then it's almost like I uprooted a dream, as opposed to going, hey, we're just going to plant that thing and we're just going to water it for a second. And if it starts to take now, okay, let's really start to think through this thing, because we could move on it. That's when it starts to make sense to go, okay, like this could be real, and we need to think about best case, worst case. So it's almost interesting of like, there's different phases of this process, and how we interact with each other depending upon the phase matters.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the next would be, I think one of the things that's most important, and I learned, is that I at times, I don't want to say I have been your worst wingman, but prior to understanding that, and I've talked about this more extensively in other podcasts, is that I'm not here to make you happy. I'm here to make you the best version of yourself. Is that there's times in our dreaming season when, as a wife, spouse, or partner, is I can't give you the easy answer. I can't let you tap out when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard. Like, the journey in between, come to find out, is hard. And as someone who's in this with you, if I have a propensity to people please or to want to make you happy, I will just go, well, whatever makes you happy, and I'll allow you to tap out of that hard moment.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll allow you to go like the path of least resistance, because I just want you to be happy. And I think, as someone who's alongside you in this, is that's not our job, is to make the other person happy. It's to hold space and to be with each other while we're doing hard things.
Yeah, it's like I'll come alongside you. I'm not going to do the push-ups, but I'll come alongside you and root you on while you do the push-ups.
Yeah.
Because that's your journey.
And I've noticed that you've done that with me even the last couple of years, where hindsight, I think both of us were always the one to go, well, if you don't like it, change it. If we don't like it, change it. And to some degree, that's been good, because it's allowed us to live in 17 different houses and try different industries. And, I think that's been great, because it's given us both the opportunity to explore and adventure. But I've noticed in the last couple of years that we've learned to just allow the other person to stay in the hard, just because it's just part of the process. You're in your lane. You're not doing anything wrong. You got to let it burn.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't oftentimes do that part very well either.
Yeah.
But it's part of the process.
It is. And I think it's also like watching how we, like, our successes, our failures, and now what you're doing. It's also this, your spouse may not be your wingman, is kind of like what you're saying too.
Day to day.
Yeah, day to day.
Yeah.
And so now you've got a Cami. So your big picture vision, all these things, and she does similar to what I would do.
Yeah.
But then she's an integrator. And so she starts to formulate all of the processes and Trello and get everything in order. We need to do this and talk to this person, and then follows up with, all of the in the weeds, the foundation that will help your dreams grow.
Yeah.
And so you also, like, depending on what you're wanting to do, is to seek out someone that complements you.
Yeah.
And in your dream.
Yeah. I would totally agree. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that has really helped us, and is another part of the process, is you and I tackle our dreams and asking not, and I've heard you say this before, is not, is it possible, is how can we? And I've loved that. I mean, you've said this over the last decade, is that it's never not possible. It's always possible if we want it to be possible. So it's not about, is this possible or not possible? It's how can we?
Yeah.
Because if I'm coming at it from the angle of, well, is this possible or not possible? I'm going to find whatever I want to find. So if I'm like, well, is this possible for me to quit my job and pursue my dreams? Well, probably not. On a bad day, no, because look, there's that, and there's that, and there's that, and there's all these reasons and excuses and even facts that will cause me not to do it. But if I'm saying, well, how can we? Right? Like, other people are doing it. Why not me? Other people are going to the moon,
Yes.
And running a 4-minute mile. And like, so why can I not do this? Like, sometimes I think that all of a sudden our ego starts to get in the way, and we start to think we're going to be the only one, or that's just, we live in a world right now that you're just seeing like AI, and like the impossible is happening, and before our very good and bad and indifferent. Right. And so I think that like going in an RV with 3 kids, instead of going, well, is this possible? And no, we would have said, no,
how
can we make this happen? And then you start to go, oh, is this the can I want? Right? Like, here's how we would have to do this. And this is how we would have to, spend our money. This is what we would have to sell. This is what we'd have to keep. This is what we'd have to stop doing. This is what we would have to start doing. And I feel like it's that process that you're like, oh, I do not want to do that. No, I actually don't want to do any of those things. But now I'm choosing not to do that, as opposed to like, well, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
That's been such a freeing process.
And I heard that years ago, because it was a conversation, I forget who it was with, but it was basically like asking like a CPA. And I talked to multiple CPAs, and this was years ago. And you ask one CPA, and you're like, can I do this? And if they don't know, because they're CPAs and they're, know everything, they say, no, you can't do that. And then you talk to another CPA, and you're like, how can we do this? And it makes them think, even if they don't know it, it opens up like, maybe we can. or they know they're like in the problem solving mode
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, no, you just
You
can't
just
do
can't
that.
do that.
And you're like, well, I just talked to another CPA, and I talked to a third one, and I asked the same question. They're like, no, you can't do that, or I don't think so. And you're like, I just talked to one that said you
So
can.
fascinating. It's just even in the way that you ask the question.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there again, going back to health and nutrition, and it's about how you position the question,
Yeah.
because the answer could be totally different
Yep.
asking the same question even to the same person.
Yeah. And I think that that's really fascinating. I mean, think about right now, all of you listening, think about an area that you and or your spouse or your business partner, or your friend have convinced yourself that, well, we can't do that, right? And a lot of times it's because we have a fixed budget, or right, my job requires that I can't do this, or well, we have in-laws that live nearby, or I mean, on and on. Like there's all these things that we would immediately say, well, I can't do it because. Now reframe it and ask, all right, how could we do this? I mean, it creates such responsibility and ownership, and it like opens up your mind to go, okay, let's say that there is 4 different ways to do it. They might not all be ideal, they might not all be easy, but it's going to force your hand on, well, now you have options. And so if you choose not to do it, that's out of a choice of not doing it versus, well, we just can't do it.
Yes, we all have options
All of
to
us.
live like out our dreams, and
Agreed.
some of those may be really hard options, but at least you know them.
Yeah.
And then it's your choice to say,
I don't choose that.
yeah,
And I think at some level, I've noticed in our journey that's such a freeing place to be, because instead of like constantly circling and like, oh, I can't do that, but I want to, and oh, I can't do that, but I want to,
poor me,
right?
and
Because
oh,
that
it
I
must be
want to, yeah,
nice.
like that never goes away. And so you're always like hopelessly wandering, and then you're judging everybody that is, and then like the woe is me kicks in at some level. If you determine, all right, there's 7 ways that we can make this happen, and I just don't want to, then you're like, great, check that thing off the list, move through it, clap for everybody else that is doing it, because good on you. Like you figured out a way to do that and like be a better human. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes, yes.
even the people now that I see doing RVs, I'm like, you do the hard, you do that, because
We,
we did it, and we moved
we
through
don't
it,
pick
and I
that hard
don't pick that
anymore.
hard anymore. But I look at anyone chasing their dreams now, where 10 years ago I would have been kind of resentful or frustrated or must be nice. Like I had those moments too. Now you just want to like fist bump anyone that's en route, because you're like, you, that's the hard you choose. You get it. You
Yeah,
get it. Like I have respect for you.
100. Yes.
I
I
think that's
mean,
huge.
I love watching people succeed and then looking at their journey. And you're like, some people that succeed, yes, you can succeed quickly, but a lot of people, the journey that they've been through to get to where they're at on any level is not like what you make it out to be, of like, must be nice, or
Mhm.
that's easy for them because they came from here or there, they had help, or like everyone is capable and able
Yeah.
to accomplish their dreams. It's just, are you willing
Yeah.
to grit the sacrifice?
Yeah. Which leads me to one of the questions that we get, which is someone had asked me, how do you support the other person in their dreams when you feel like you barely have time for your own? And for me, this was probably in 2019, and we were getting ready to have our 4th baby. And both of us were getting clear on what we really wanted. And we knew that not only in our own, we were starting to really separate our lanes in regards to our dreams, like they were moving in different directions. But you knew the importance of yours, I knew the importance of mine. And then we were getting ready to have our 4th baby. We still wanted to homeschool. And in that moment, it was though we just intuitively knew that we needed a support person at home. And so when we hired an au pair, though some people might call that an expense, instead of going, well, we don't have time, we don't have time, and both of us going, well, I'm just going to put my dream on the shelf. Not that our kids aren't our dream, they're a part of our dream, but we, neither one of us wanted to also sacrifice the dream that God had given us in our career. I feel like was the moment that we went, man, we need support. We need not just within our business, but at home. And that's when we invested in an au pair, and the relationship, that was established at that point in time. And I feel like that was such a turning point for us, because it was a time that we decided not to lower our standards of the dreams that God's given us in any area, right? Like we didn't lower our standards financially, relationally, within our career. Like we were like, okay, we've got to actually just invest in all of our dreams. And I think that's paid dividends for us.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there again, how you frame it, how you look at it. Is this like an expense, or is this potentially like a asset to us to allow us to have the flexibility and free time, not just to work more, but also to spend quality time with each of the kids
Yeah.
and come and go because we do homeschool as well.
Yeah.
So it allows us like just more options.
Hmm.
And 100%. I mean, it's like looking at the phone and you're like, well, this is an expense. Well, it is if you just use it for one way,
Right.
but it actually is, you can make a ton of money
Yep.
off of that or get in shape, or like the information on a phone right now
Hmm.
is like, to me, greater than college,
Yeah.
like YouTube University.
Yeah. Careful, careful there. Hey. But I think it's true. I mean, I think what that did though is it allowed us to not surrender, though again, I don't want to say this, like I believe that there's times that we do, there's a compromise, but there's not a lowering of standards. I think that there's a subtle difference there of like, I think compromise is important. I think more of looking at what season are we in, how much capacity do I have, how much capacity do you have, that's important conversation without lowering your standards. Because what happens over time is that, well, I just put my dreams on the shelf and raise my kids, and you're like, well, but what our kids need is people who are on fire. They need parents who are on fire about their dreams. And if it's them as kids, great. But if you are putting your weight or your health or your marriage or that book or the business that you want to start on the shelf, that's actually not really healthy, because I think our kids need to see that. And so I think what's been really important for us is, again, that moment when we're like, all right, what do we need to be to actually see our dreams come true? And so that quote unquote expense soon became an investment. And then ultimately here we are, 4 years later, and these relationships that we've had with our au pairs has been incredible.
Yeah.
So incredible.
Yes.
So I think a support of some kind is hugely beneficial.
Yes. I would agree.
Yeah.
It's been a game changer. She
Game
was just
changer.
gone for like a week, and it was like
Ah,
you notice, and it was awesome. Not having anybody in the house, and you just got to hang out, and it was
Travis got to walk around naked. Let's be honest. He was really,
yeah,
that's the only reason is
yeah, in
that
front of my kids. That's what I do. But you appreciate it because just the flexibility that it gives us, and if there again you run the cost of it relative to hiring someone
Mhm.
part-time that is local, and the
Mhm.
numbers are the same.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would we not have the flexibility of someone just living with us, give our kids the opportunity to learn about a new culture and be around someone that's
Mhm.
consistent?
Yep.
Because let's face it, if you have a local babysitter, they're typically not the most consistent and reliable.
Yep.
And so this is like an in-house, and you start to build a relationship with them, but you
Mhm.
also get to show them like America.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them come from overseas, and
Yep.
so it's a win-win.
Yeah. It's
Like
super
there's
cool.
no bad. Like if you from the numbers to the opportunity
Yeah.
for them, for us, for the kids.
Yeah. I agree. Well, and I think it just in closing, just to put kind of a bow on this is, if you find yourself in a relationship, whether it's your marriage or a business relationship, and you just feel like you are not dreaming together, that you're on different pages, I want to encourage us that I don't want the enemy to get in there and create a bigger chasm than there needs to be. But even where it says in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love is a safe place of shelter, for it never stops believing the best for others, and it never takes failure as a defeat, for it never gives up. And I just think that at some level, we either align to truth or we don't. And even if you're at a hard part in your marriage or you're at a hard place in a relationship, if we go back and go, no, I just want the biblical truth to be my true north. I want to do this well. I want to love well. I want to support well. Then I would encourage you just to read 1 Corinthians 13 in a different translation or in a way that it comes alive, because it says that love is a safe shelter. It covers all things. It does not focus on what is wrong, but it will bear with the shortcomings of others. It protects and it doesn't expose. And then it never takes failure as a defeat. It never gives up, which means it creates a safe place for us to be who we are, but doesn't allow us to stay where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to encourage you that wherever you're at in your relationships is to lean in to learn this kind of love, and then learn to be a a example of what biblical love looks like, which is meeting yourself and other people where they're at and then loving well to not let them stay where they are.
Yes. And what I would say, because when after you told me that Shane said that, I'm like, it's so spot on. Maybe because it's like we've asked questions, all the time. I would say maybe 50% of the time, you ask someone if they're not living out and pursuing, their God given dreams. It's like they say, I don't know. And the response is like, you do know.
Mhm.
But after Shane said that, I'm like, well, maybe you don't know your dream because you've lost yourself.
Yeah.
But once you find yourself, you'll find your dream.
Yeah.
And so it's like, find yourself, but what are you doing to find yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing to work on yourself?
Yeah.
And then I think through that, your dreams will come to light
Yeah.
to then start to work on and see if, that's the path that you want to pursue.
Yeah. So, from Travis and I to all of you, we hope that this encourages you in the relationships that you're forging and equips you to dream together personally, professionally, in all relationships. Until next time.
Dream on.